So this is the point where I do a question and answer session. If you have any questions over what I went over, anything that didn't make sense, maybe I went too fast, maybe even a question that's not related to this but something else, go for it. I mean, anybody who wants to ask a question.
You know, it's kind of frightening to think how fast our life expectancy is decreasing, isn't it?
It is. It is. Modern science would tell us that we're getting, we're getting a longer lifespan, but according to the Bible, we're not. We're getting smaller and smaller, as far as lifespan goes. And a lot of people, they say they don't believe that Noah or that Adam lived that long, and it is. Right there's the evidence. And it lines right up with scientific evidence today.
So the flood destroyed the whole world.
It did. Yeah, the flood destroyed the whole world. And there is just way too much evidence that it actually occurred for it to be refuted.
Well, did they not? Seems like I remember seeing a documentary on TV or something about where they thought they had found the ark. Do you remember that?
I have seen a lot of presentations where they say that they found the ark. In my own opinion, I don't think that they will ever find it. Most likely, just based on human behavior after the flood, most likely they would have dismantled it. They would have used the wood for fire, for building, for different things. They wouldn't have just left it there because that's a lot of very useful material at that time.
That's true.
So I don't think that they will ever find it. I think it's a possibility they may find somewhat a little amount of it left, but I would say most likely not, because the way that fossils and petrified things are formed is typically they have to be buried very quickly, and seeing how the ark landed on top of the mountain and it wasn't buried by sediment, most likely it would have been very easy to rot after a few hundred years.
In the Bible, it says that God created the earth in 7 days. How does that fit into your presentation?
I actually give a presentation just on that, just on how many days it took. I do believe they were literal days. I think when you look at the Hebrew, the word that is used there in the Genesis account is yom. And anywhere in the Old Testament the word yom is used, it typifies a 24-hour day. Also in the Genesis account of creation you find the words for day and night and morning and evening. And everywhere in the Old Testament where you find those in conjunction, it also means a literal 24-hour day. And actually, I give a presentation just on that, just on the age of the earth, the age of the universe. And
from what you have learned, do you believe that?
I do, absolutely. And I think that there's evidence for that. And that would be, another time. Hopefully, I would be able to present on that. But I could show you a lot of evidence that the earth was created in a literal 6 days.
So the flood kind of made everything out of kilter, right? And then you had the formation of your rocks, and you had the formation of the ocean, you had the formation of the land, and all of that took place after the flood.
Well, I wouldn't say that every layer that we find today is flood layers, but I would say the majority of them are, the majority of fossils that we find. Essentially what happened when the flood occurred was all life living at that time, except for the ones, things that were brought onto the ark, was obliterated. Now, plants and things like that, of course, their seeds would have been scattered all over the world. And they've even found seeds that supposedly were thousands of years old. They were actually able to grow. They found honey from Egypt that was, thousands of years old, that they, was still, it hadn't fermented, it hadn't been eaten up by bacteria or anything like that. So things can be preserved if they're given the right condition. I believe before the flood, though, there were a lot more animals, there As far as variety, I would say the kind of species that we see today, some of them are no longer in existence, you know, as far as the Noah's time.
Everything being covered in water after the flood, what role did gravity play in this?
Gravity, as far as
Because you're going to have water, you're going to have the flood just kind of displaced everything, you know, created different things.
yeah.
In gravity, when you have different things and different objects that are opposing each other, you have a gravitational field. What role do you think gravity played in the formation of the Earth after the flood?
I mean, as far as gravity goes, I don't think that gravity itself would have changed much, if at all, because the size of the Earth itself didn't change. And gravity is, technically, you and I have gravity.
Yes.
We can't see it, but technically, the closer I get to you, the more I'm bending the space-time around you.
Yeah, that was my point, because you're going to have the displacement of all of these rock layers and everything, so
Yeah.
you're going to have a certain gravitational effect there.
I think it would have had much more of an effect on the magnetism, the magnetic poles in the Earth, than the gravity itself. And like I said, the core samples that they took of the ocean floor is good evidence that it did rapidly change. If you could picture this, when the flood occurred, it ripped up trees, it ripped up animals, it drowned everything except for what was on the ark. And I didn't go over this in my presentation, but scientists believe that there were two supercontinents before today's continents, Rodinia and Pangaea, in that order. And according to John Baumgartner's model, Rodinia split up underneath the water into different continents, came back together, formed Pangaea, and then split up into today's continents, and that all happened within the roughly 9 and 10 month period that the Earth was covered in water. And he backs it up with math.
So you think that all these things happen, not during a long period of time, but within a short period of time?
I think they definitely happen within a short period of time, and I think that it lines up more with the evidence than today's theories would have you believe.
And then that correlates with what the Bible says.
It does, absolutely. I believe you can trust the Bible on how many days it took to create. I think you can trust the Bible on how many days the flood occurred. I think you can trust the Bible on how long these people actually lived, even though a lot of people don't believe it. And there are so many things in the Bible that say, well, it contradicts today's science. The thing is, today's science is based on premises and guesses, educated guesses. One thing I go over in another presentation is the way that they date fossils, and it's a very circular reasoning. When they find a fossil here, a lot of times they'll date it by the layer it's in. But if they find a fossil here, or they find a layer here, sometimes they'll date the layer by the fossil that's in it, and vice versa. And they don't actually, and a lot of times when they do actually test it with radiometric dating, they find erroneous dates.
How do they make a determination about a fossil? I mean, as far as the age of the fossil, what the fossil was it a tree, was it a plant? How do they make that determination?
It's a number of things. Many people that do this type of research have PhDs. They have thoroughly studied modern day organisms and looked at the anatomy of them, and that way they can go back in when they look at a fossil, they can say, well, this particular process on a bone is here and not here, and just essentially just repetition. They've learned what to look for. But as far as